says live. Good. It says live. Let's see what happens. I'll just hang out here for a minute and kind of see what happens. It says live. Yeah, we'll just try this out and see. It's public. There we go. Yeah, I think, hi, Johan. Hello. It looks like maybe we made it. Let me turn this down so we don't get crosstalk between the two systems. But I had set this up to schedule the meeting, and then I couldn't figure out how to get to go live, so I just destroyed the meeting and started over finally. But hopefully you're hearing me okay. Yay, it's working. Yay. Hey, Mitchell. Good to see you. Yeah, it's first time, definitely. I did a private one last night, but I didn't try to go through a schedule with it. I just went ahead and streamed it to see if it would go, and it did. So anyway, let's get started. So what I wanted to do today was to set up kind of three parts. So a question and answer. So if you have any questions, let me know what those are. And if you would, please use the @DJ Ware. That way I can find your chat, and then I can, what I want to do is, was something kind of fancy, which was try to show it on the screen. So let me, I'm going to try to get that right now and put that in a window. Hopefully I won't break everything by doing this. There we go. So let's see if that works. We'll do a simple test here. So yes, it is the first time, and definitely. And me get working now. Yep. Sorry for the delay. I should join. There's a group on here that I've been a member of for a long time called Streaming Idiots. I guess I should have talked to them first about doing this. The last time I did a live stream on YouTube, it was the old method, and this new one is just is not for me. Hey, Mitchell. Hey, Mikkel. So, and then what I wanted to do was, the second part of it was to figure out how to get Clear OS installed and talk about that a little bit. So, yeah, that's what I'll try to do today. And so, if I know that probably I've lost some of the people that were probably going to come, but that's all right. We'll trundle on and try this out. So. Let me get over to my screen here, and oops, wrong password. Yep, I know. Yeah, it's amazing how much better it works with the right one. So this is the one I had started with, and I'm not sure exactly where I left it, but we'll bring it up and see. So after you it's just like a conventional CentOS install for a server. And the reason why I wanted to cover ClearOS is from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. The reason why I wanted to cover it is they have such a unique way about installing it. They, if you have three different ways you can install the server. You can install it as a public server, in which case it calls in all kinds of packages to help you protect your system from the internet. Then there's a gateway where you're kind of in a DMZ kind of a situation where you're acting as an entry point to your backend servers. And then there's another set of tools that get called in for that. And then there's a private server which sits inside of your private network, and that has a completely different set of tools that it sets up initially as well. So it's kind of interesting in that respect, is that they've really gone through an awful lot of thought and planning to do this, and I kind of wanted to share that with you in case you guys had never seen this before. I haven't seen hardly any videos of Clear OS. This is not the same as Clear Linux. Clear Linux is totally different. That's by Intel. So yeah, let me put in the URL here. Not that one. Let's see. What, didn't it? I guess it didn't do it. Let me type it in. This is what, so I've done a lot of demos, and it's always whatever can go wrong will go wrong. So the best thing is never get rattled about it. Just no. Yeah, let's try that again. Not as a search though. Okay, so normally it would, this is right in the middle. I had started to work on this, and oops, and if I'll back up and try to step you through this. It's already gone through this. Let me just back up to the beginning here so you can kind of see how it is put together. I don't know how far it will let me back up, but yeah, it looks like it's letting me do it. So the very first question it's going to ask you is, what kind of server is it that you have? I'm not going to go through the install because it's so, I mean, if you've done any kind of install with CentOS or Fedora, it's the same. It's the same stuff where, you know, you pick from the where you want to, you know, what your media is, where you want to put it on the hard drive, what your network is, and then you put in your root password, and off to the races you go. It's nothing new there. So, but this is all new. So it uses a web front end to guide you through. Now, one thing I will say is that it is a system that's put together for corporations as well as individuals. So there's a free version for the community. So there's nothing you have to pay for to use this if you're using it as the community edition. But if you need support, and corporations always seem to like that. They always are worried about, who am I going to call at 3 o'clock in the morning to come and fix my problem? Then they can pay for support, and HPE will provide that support to them. And I think there's a number of tiers and levels that they can choose from to get that. So unlike Red Hat, which I think only has one tier that I'm aware of, it's 9 to 6, and I think it's 9 to 4 in Europe. But it's different in the US than it is in Europe. Don't know why, but I guess that's just the way they've set it up. But anyway, first thing is first. So I can pick I want a public server, I can pick that I want a gateway, or I can pick that I want a private server. So I'm just going to do a private server. And then it'll ask me to check and modify my network parameters for the server. Now I'm using a DHCP address. That's not really the smartest thing to do for a server. It's a good way to lose one because your DHCP addresses will change. But I'm going to leave that this way today. I already have it set up the way I want it, and I've been playing around with it. So I may come back and talk about that some more. And so Edwin says, Linux allegedly is being security and privacy centered, have very few distros with secure boot and AppArmor, SE Linux enabled by default. So SE Linux you'll find more over in this camp, over in the Red Hat camp. And yeah, it is enabled by default over here. Ubuntu does not enable AppArmor by default, I don't believe, and they're the ones that developed AppArmor, which is also very good for security. So I'm not knocking it, but yeah, you do have to enable that. And in Red Hat and even Fedora, you actually have to turn it back if you're doing a lot of things with the system, because SE Linux, you don't want to turn it off, but you might want to whitelist the kind of applications that you are doing, because it will cause issues, especially with Pulse Audio. It seems to be the Alyssa drivers and Pulse Audio for some reason will trigger SE Linux constantly. But yeah, those are still there. Oh yeah, well, Fedora is a desktop OS, and they do enable SE Linux now. Uh, SE Linux has a learning curve, though. I can tell you, AppArmor is far easier to understand and figure out. SE Linux has a bit of a learning curve. So anyway, let's go through this. So the next step is you can choose which edition you want, and these two down here you have to pay for. This one you don't. So guess which one I'm picking, right? So all you have to do is create a registration, and the only reason for that is they generate a host key for you, and that is so that you're allowed to go in and get updates, and then you can purchase things on the marketplace. They don't track you, but what they do is they whenever there's an update to the system, if you've downloaded things from the marketplace, that ID is what's used to link back which offerings to give you to make sure that you're updated properly. So at least that's what I've been able to procure from their site. They do not track you, although I suppose they could. I mean, you never know today. People say they don't track, and then you find out 6 months later they're tracking the crap out of you and selling your data to every Joe in the world to get there. So I've already done the updates, and the next step should be to go in and start doing configuration. So I'm going to go ahead. I have a actual internet IP and domain. So let's see. I'm going to call this, these are always my test servers. Use colors. Red is always ones that I always start with red, then I promote them to yellow and then green once I've tested them, and that's how I do things. And purple is usually ones that I have thrown away and won't ever use again. So, all right, so then I just go here, find my time zone. I had a kind of it took a minute for this one the last time. I had to punch it a few times, and then it finally went. Okay, I think it took it. So this is the marketplace, and in here you have everything from you can list packages by function, by category, by an individual file if you want to do a quick select or a skip, or just skip the wizard and just start looking for stuff. I'm going to try this by function, and we'll just see how that goes, and then I should just go next. And then it'll start me out in directory services. And one of the unique things about Clear OS, I'm going to be careful, I'm going to say, is that this right here is, now I'm not going to do that, but there are businesses that use Active Directory a lot for their internal systems. Honestly, and I understand why they do that, but in the most server farms, this is one of the biggest problems that most Linux installations have to deal with, is if they have an Active Directory set up, it seems like it's always a mandate that you have to bend Linux to the will of Active Directory, because it cannot bend its will to LDAP, which is allegedly is a standard of. So they charge for that, but there aren't very many places that I know of that have an active solution for that. And I've noticed that in some of the videos I've done in the past, people have asked me about how do you deal with Active Directory. Well, the only way you deal with it is you have to buy commercial packages to deal with it, unless you want to create LDIF files and then write conversion routines to get between you and Active Directory, which, let me tell you, that's a real pain in the rear end. I've done that, not fun. So I'm going to pick directory server, and the reason I'm going to do that is because when I go to set up my accounts, it's going to have me install this anyway. So I'll go ahead and leave that active. And then I can pick if I'm going to do one-for-one NAT. And if I was using this to expose to the internet, which I would never do from an internal server, I would always put it out on on either a DMZ or out in the what we normally call, we have rings in most of the servers that I've ever dealt with. Now these are in high security environments, but there are rings. There is red, which is disconnected from everything. A red ring is never connected to any other network, and you have to have a jack that's jacked into it. There's no way for you to access it, and even in fact, the access to the red zone is even from a room. You have to go to a room, unlock a door, and get in to be able to get to it. Then you have what's called a green zone. A green zone is the private network. Then you have a blue zone, which is the DMZ, and then you have the red zone, which is normally the internet. So if I was doing a one-to-one NAT, I would put my servers out in the red zone, not anywhere else. I mean, other than maybe a DMZ, but I probably wouldn't put an Apache server in the DMZ. I would probably expose it to the internet. And then it would be stripped down, bare. Stripped down to the absolute bare. If I wanted to install a custom firewall, I can do that. I'm not going to do the one-for-one. If I wanted a DHCP server, now DHCP servers are normally frowned upon in public service servers, but for private servers, it's perfectly okay to do that. But I already have one, and you don't want to put up more than one, of course. If I was going to install a DMZ, I can do that. If I wanted to, it's already selected that one, I think. Yep. Dynamic DNS, if I needed that, I could do that. Dynamic VPN. There's a number of different, I think this one is not one I'm familiar with. It's not a firewall that I use, but I know I've seen that one around before egress. And this one would be the typical IP tables. There's OpenVPN, port forwarding, and then you've got static IPsec, which is really good if you're having people come in through the firewall, but typically you do that through your routers, right? Typically you do that across the routers and not across your servers unless you're using it as a gateway, into your network. Yeah, AppArmor is never. That might be true of the servers, Fanico, but I don't think AppArmor is enabled by default on the desktop. I think that's if you're using the desktop, I think you have to do that. But you might be right. I just don't run that many Ubuntu servers. I have my first one over there, which is my ZFS my test bed for ZFS and Thunderbolt. So that's my first one. I normally run Red Hat or CentOS on mine. Just been around it longer. I am going to put this out, and that, and that, and that, and that. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do those. Wait, did I just pick one that I had to pay for? Let me make sure I didn't, because I don't want to pay for anything. Oh, no, we don't want that one. Screw that. Yeah. I mean, you can always go to Snort and you can apply for an IP and then get an ID from them and to get theirs for free. So now, if these are your blacklist for your content filters and gateway antivirus, if you want to do, I'm going to do that because I selected it earlier. There's also a radius server if you're using that level of protection for your wireless. Radius is used to provide enterprise level WEP, and it is wireless is not really secure, but at least enterprise is more secure than the other stuff. Then you have Google Account Sync, IMAP, and POP server if you need that for your email. And then there's Zarafa and Capano. I'm not sure what those are. I could go look, I guess. We could learn more and see what those are. Collaboration and groupware platform. Well, that's nice. I could talk to myself on groupware, set up committee meetings with myself. All right. So, and then this one, what is that? What is Zarafa? Mail storage and another groupware solution. Yeah, okay. All right. So let's see what other goodies we can get. Disaster prevention. So I think there's one that I'm going to go ahead and select the backup PC. This allows, I think if I'm right about this, I think this allows workstations to back up Linux and Windows desktops to a local storage array. Right. So yeah, that's what I thought. It was one where you could allow your users to use your servers as a backup mechanism. So yeah, we'll take that. And there should also, I want this so I can keep tabs on the storage for the machine. And let's see. No, I don't have a RAID, so I don't care about that. Is there anything else I want? No, I don't think so. Of course, all these things we are selecting, we're going to have to configure, right? If I played around with this, and they say it's free, but it's not, because the first thing Servio does is try to hook you with a subscription fee. So, and I know Plex they do something similar, don't they? I don't use Plex. So Zen uses KVM, so I'm not quite sure what your question is, Edwin. The baseline under, even Proxmox, the baseline under Proxmox is KVM as well. Is KVM fast? KVM is integrated into the kernel, so all your stuff is taking place. You don't have syscalls that are flying back and forth between user land and the kernel protected space. So is it faster? Yeah, it's faster because you don't have that interaction there. Zen, I would recommend, instead of looking at Zen, look at XCP-ng. Zen has started to, they have a free version, but they've started to take back some of the packages in hopes to entice you to buy it. Whereas XCP-ng they were the originators of Zen, and so they've kind of taken it back, reworked it, and put all of the features back into it again. So I've used both. I started out with XCP-ng. I like XCP-ng. The only problem I have with it is I have a Gluster network, and it doesn't support it. Proxmox does. So let me give you the plus and minuses. There's always plus and minuses on every solution, right? XCP-ng plus. You can migrate VMs easy. You can bring in OVRs and OVAs into the system easy. Proxmox, you can migrate easy. You cannot bring in OVRs and OVAs very easily. That means that if someone packages up an open virtual machine archive, and they want to give you a copy of what their virtual machine looks like, it's a real pain in the butt on Proxmox to install it, because basically what you have to do is you have to create the VM, you have to go in and look at the manifest list for the OVA and find out how much memory it is, how much disk it is, and basically set it up, then tear apart the OVA and remount their hard drives in on top of the ones that you created. So yeah, Proxmox is so it depends on what your needs are. If you're going to be bringing in a lot of OVAs, or you want to use OVAs to bring in stuff, Proxmox isn't for you. If you have a Gluster network or you have a Ceph network, then XCP-ng is not for you, because Proxmox will support both Ceph and Gluster for your object store. So that's the problem in this world. There is no, hey, this is the best answer. It just depends on what your needs are. You have to always evaluate software according to what your requirements are, and it doesn't matter which one you use. They're both very, very good. I would have no qualms, recommending XCP-ng, and I have no qualms recommending Proxmox. They're both very good. But if your requirements mandate one way or the other, then yeah. So I guess that, again, I hate to sound like a consultant, but it kind of depends, right? if you're running off of Ceph, Ceph is a lot better at object store than Gluster is. Gluster is meant for normal files. It likes video files. It likes large binary files. It doesn't. Gluster doesn't really like small files very much, and Ceph doesn't really like small files either. But I think the edge would go to Ceph for an object store. And if you do that, you'll find, yes, it will run quite fast. In fact, some of the benchmarks I did against ESXi, now not against the higher tiered versions of ESXi, that will scream. You get into what they call the enterprise cluster. Yeah, their stuff really screams. But you get into the low end stuff like they sell for small businesses, XCP and Proxmox both will run rings around it. I mean, it is not that fast. It is not that fast. It takes longer on ESXi to set up a VM for the first time than it does for Proxmox to be done installing it, and the same with XCP and G. Here's my advice: write down what you want it to do, and then go check them both out, and go through the features, and then just match up your requirements with it and see which one works best for you. If all you're going to do is an iSCSI object store, they both will work just fine for that. And yeah, they'll both work fine for that. If you're going to use ZFS will be okay. Yeah, ZFS will be fine. The reason why I always suggest going Ceph or Gluster is ZFS is a file store, and Ceph, they have a file store, but it's a bolt-on. But their real meat is object store, and that's what you really want for performance. And I'll tell you why. VMs get real finicky about when you're running them. If they're not able to complete a write. Let's say you're doing an asynchronous file system, and it can't see the write complete. It'll panic. Most of the virtual machines will panic that I've been around. So in Gluster and Ceph are both written so that they handle that kind of a situation. ZFS, you can turn on. You can get yourself in trouble with ZFS on virtual machines. It's an option. You can turn it off. So yeah. So just be aware of that if you're using ZFS. Make sure that you don't use asynchronous writes, because VMs don't like that. They want to know that the write completed. They don't want to wait and see if there's a message that comes back eventually that it completes. They will panic. So I hope that helped. BitTorrent client on a server. Where'd you see a BitTorrent? Did you see a BitTorrent, Jeffrey? Oh yeah, it's right there. Transmission BitTorrent client. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it wouldn't be my choice either. All right. Yeah, that wouldn't be my choice to put on a server either. Thanks, good catch. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and back this up, but I'm going to make sure that I'm not going to get charged for these, because I don't really want to be paying for this. So now it's going to go through this install process. So while it's doing that, I'll just kind of sit here and see if I can answer some more questions. What is the web browser you normally use? So I'm using Chrome right now because of the plugin that I'm using I had it so it was capturing comments and putting them back on the screen, but I normally do not use Chrome. I normally use Firefox or Tor. If I'm in uncharted ground and I'm doing research on something, and I don't want to get and the only reason I use Tor is I just don't want to get advertisements on stuff that I'm researching, because I don't know if I want your product or not. So and so I'll use Tor to do that. I'm not a spy. I'm just interested in protecting my privacy a little bit. Yeah, you're welcome, Edwin, anytime. I have a lot of opinions. I'll back up some of it with facts. I mean, I've tried a lot of the things that you're talking about. We did run an ESXi network commercially on ZFS, it's not a problem. You can definitely do it. It'll definitely work. Yeah, you pay a lot for ESXi. It's what, 40? It's about $4,000 a year now for ESXi and whatever. What do they call it? I don't even remember anymore. What the thing that actually makes it actually do work across the network. Yeah, I've been kind of away from ESXi for a long time. We had a group up in Boulder that they did a lot of stuff with Zen. They loved it. And I always kind of laughed at them, and I don't laugh at them anymore. I just thought they were kind of out on the fringes, but I'm not laughing anymore. They actually had it right. They were actually saving the company money, so. And that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. It's not that I don't like ESXi. ESXi is fine. If you need that 3 o'clock in the morning, if you have a problem and you need to get a hold of somebody, you can get a hold of somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning. So with them, and their stuff does work. It's the only problem that I have with ESXi is that they're constantly deprecating hardware. Every time there's a new version that comes out, it seems like, oh crap, well there goes another rack of servers we're going to have to get rid of. All right, so I'll go ahead and update my navigation menus on this side. I'm going to use the default. You can lay this out, your dashboard out any way you want. So I've gone through all the install stuff. So let's see. I guess the first thing I should have in here somewhere is a shutdown and a restart. And users and groups, yeah, we'll do that. And yeah, reports, last 24 hours is good. And recent activity. Yeah, let's see. You can lay this out any way you want. There's a book here to go through all this stuff with you. Oh yeah, yes, yes you can, Edwin. It doesn't care what the file system is. That's just where you store. I mean, in Proxmox, when you set up your stores, well here, I can actually show you. So here's my storage view. So here's my stores that I currently have set up. So this one, I can specify the type of content that it's going to have. I don't know if it'll actually show me that. Maybe in the summary it might. No. When you set these up, you can set them up to store like backup or templates or your ISO files or the actual virtual drives, the VMDKs. You can actually set it up where you want to store those in your network. So there's my Gluster cluster right there. And currently I have stripped it down because I'm redoing this. I always are redoing stuff. So I've kind of got stuff moved up here and I'm going to move it back down. So yes, you can move things back and forth pretty easily. XCPNG, yes, you can move stuff very easily. In fact, you can, on both of them, you can even move it between servers pretty easily as well. CEPH, Jeffrey, CEPH. Ceph you'll come into contact with a lot in high performance computing. So let me give you the definition. So things like RAIDs and ZFS would be in that category, even though it's a RAID, but not really a RAID. But ZFS and RAIDs, those are what's called scale up. So scale up means that in order for me to add storage, I have to add on to the same server to do that, and mount my drives out from there until I reach the maximum number of controlling nodes or controllers that I can stick in the machine. Ceph and Gluster belong to a class of file systems that are called scale out. They use multiple servers to scale out. So you can start with, like Gluster, you can start with 3. In Ceph, it takes 4 to start with. So you need 4 servers on Ceph and 3 with Gluster. And then each one of those can contain a RAID or a ZFS mount that has storage on it, and then you can just add servers until you reach several petabytes of storage. Both Ceph and Gluster perform quite well at petabyte plus storage. So for home, that's probably not too important, but if you're looking at this from work. Hi, Joe. Good to see you. So, all right, let's go back and screw up more of this over here. So, I'm just going to kind of go down through the list here. So, the cloud has my software update manager. The gateway has my virus protection, and then this should be my intrusion protection. And then my server has my backup and my directory server, my network. I should have my firewall, my infrastructure and settings. But these are all the things that I customized when I installed this. So let me, I don't see my disk. Let me see. Where's my disk? Maybe here? Ah, there it is. So, yeah, we've all seen that pattern before, right? Where if you lost your files, it'll give you this big bullseye map of what's going on. So, that I just think that, I mean, it's a little bit old on the kernel. That's the only thing that but you know, that's okay. I know some server farms that are still running on 6.5 CentOS, so yeah, it's not unusual. Sometimes they just don't want to pay for the time it takes somebody to go and upgrade them, but they're going to have to now, because I think there's a vulnerability at 6.5 on that kernel. But yeah, so let me go back to what I was doing here. Hold on. Let me go back over here. And I'm going to try this and see if I can. Yeah, I mean, that should be, I mean, like I said, Edwin, that should be fine. So, yeah, that should work fine. And then, let's see, I answered that one, I think. And I think I answered this. Oh, well, all right. So that's a good question. So what do I do? Here's for right or wrong. This is what I do. I keep most of my installs located in my home directory. So if I have packages that are system level packages, I always write down which ones I've installed, and I keep a list. I mean, and I don't physically write them down. I just keep a list on the computer somewhere, and every time that, now what I do with this, I use Fedora. Every time Fedora comes out with a new release, I've had so many problems in migrating from one to the next that I just say, okay, screw this. I'm just going to install a brand new version of Fedora from scratch. And then I will copy my home directory back over, and that will bring up most of my stuff. And then all I have to do is install the packages that were system level from my list. That's the way I clear out the mess. I'm pretty careful, though, about when I install the packages. I did a video a while back on how to find out what might be in conflict. So you might want to go look at that, because if you can get ahead of the game and you can find out which ones that could cause conflicts in your system, that's far better than incurring that problem when you hit it because you installed a package that rode over top of a version that you didn't want to lose because now you broke something. So my glass, I have a very unique, it's sitting behind me here. Yeah, let me get out of the way. That's my Gluster server right there. It is a set of ARM machines that I use, and they are Odroid H1s and H2s. So I do not run ZFS. I run XFS on those servers, and then I use Gluster to bring them all together. I don't care so much about the bandwidth, but I can tell you that the benchmarks I've done on it are slightly slower than ZFS. But, you know, in ZFS has, well, let me put it this way. If I'm doing file level benchmarks, Gluster will lose to ZFS. If I'm doing object store benchmarks, ZFS will lose to Gluster, because that's what Gluster's written for, is to do object store. So at least that's been my experience. I think I have some benchmarks on that, and I was running NFS on across on both Gluster and ZFS, and ZFS was just, it was kicking my butt. so so I hope that answered it. Um, I don't run it. I don't. My ZFS pool sits off on its own. I use traditional ways to access that through NFS and Samba. Although I don't use Samba much anymore. I don't have any need for Windows anymore, so I don't use that. So Tinkerer, hi, good to see you. Do I use modules on Fedora? Yes, I do. Uh, I have, like I said, I have some weird cards that are in my machine that I'd have to use the modules for in order for those to work. And do they cause me problems? They are causing me a problem right now. Yes, they do. ButterFS. So I hope that answered your question, Tinker. Yes, I do. I've been using Snapper with ButterFS to roll back if I want to clean out a recent install. Okay, yeah. There's a couple other ways you could do that. There's also Clear Linux also does that, where they create an immutable file system, and there's also Fedora Silverblue, which also does that, where it creates an immutable file system, and then it basically creates snapshots of your system automatically as the upgrades occur. So yeah, ButterFS is. I'll be honest with you. I used ButterFS when it first came out, and the first thing, of course, I did was put it in a RAID, and that led to trouble because ButterFS, and even to this day, still doesn't handle RAIDs very well, and eventually it self-destructed, and it took a bunch of my data with it. Fortunately, I did have backups, but the amount of time in restoring that much storage, I think it was about 40 terabyte. And this was back 10 years ago when it took a heck of a long time to copy 10 terabyte. That took weeks to restore. So yeah, I don't trust ButterFS on RAIDs. And I noticed that Synology apparently doesn't either. I noticed that they use ButterFS, but they don't actually use it to do the RAID. I noticed they do it on top of LVMS. So I thought that was kind of clever. So they kind of let the logical volume manager handle the RAID and then ButterFS to do it on top. ButterFS works very good for single file systems. For what I hear, I just won't trust it. I just don't. Once burned, never again. I don't want to go through that experience again. I use ZFS. I like ZFS. ZFS just works. And I can tell you that the testing I'm doing on Linux, I'm very impressed with the job these guys are doing. ZFS went through, of course, it was developed by Sun, right? So it lives and breathes on BSD. That's where it was developed, and that's where it was kind of done. ZFS to install is a root. Well, I don't run ZFS on a boot drive. I use it for data. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. I don't disagree. I wouldn't disagree. Yeah, if you're trying to put ZFS up for the first time on a machine, although Ubuntu has an experimental version, you can put it on the root as you install it. So that doesn't appear to be too hard to do. At least using their stuff. Now I wouldn't want to try that with Fedora. That might take a while to figure that out. But let's see. What was I talking about? I was talking about the recent installs. So yeah. Anyway, that's the only things I had. I don't know. No. Is there any connection between ClearOS and Clear Linux? ClearOS is done by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Clear Linux is done by Intel. And Clear Linux is a very sophisticated release designed for performance. And of course Intel, I'm sure, has uncorked every trick in the book in order to do it. Although I've heard that people on AMD processors are able to get really good performance out of Clear Linux as well. Clear Linux is a speed demon. Clear OS is a server. It's written for servers, and you can. And I don't know if you saw that when I went through it, but they set up kind of a very unique way. Servers usually take. I don't know if you guys have set up servers commercially or not, but to get it through, usually you have to spend. It's mostly getting it certified. If you're doing PCI DSS, is your payment card services for like your credit card handling through the system, that certification can take 4 to 6 weeks. If you're doing, if you're installing servers in the traditional way from packages, that can take a month just to get that far, to get up. Depends on how complex your servers are, but it's mostly making sure that you've checked out and all the servers and all the packages are all working, that you have your mechanisms for backup working, and you can prove that. You have I've worked in some very formal environments where you had to do gates before they would let you actually put the system up and run in production. So yeah, gates are not fun. That's where you sit around and they'll come out with these lists that have like 99 pages of faults that they found in your system. And that's not unusual, by the way. The first time somebody did that to me, I was like, oh my God, why, you hate me or what? And they were like, no, that's normal. Don't worry. To have all these things that you have to fix. Oh. So, yeah, I'm afraid I've spent too many years of my life consulting. If you have file systems that, ext4, very good. There is nothing wrong with ext4. People say, oh, it's old. ext4 is a good match for Linux because it is tuned to do fopen, fwrite, fread. Well, guess what? Most of the I/O on Linux is fopen, fread, fwrite, and ext4 is highly tuned to that. It also has journaling, which is very good. I did a benchmark where I actually was comparing XFS, and I think it was one of the new ones that Red Hat's looking at, and also ext4. ext4 was getting its butt kicked on everything until it got into the Linux I/O, and then it just walked away. It walked over all of them, including ButterFS. It actually will outperform ButterFS doing Linux I/O. So ext4, very good. Don't discount it. Don't diss it. Go do your own benchmarks on it and see if I'm right. XFS is also, it's an old file system, but here's the thing. The guys that are working on XFS for Linux, there was a lot of things that didn't get put into the initial release of XFS on Linux. And so those guys that are doing the development went back to the drawing board. They went back and they talked to the guys. The SIGGRAPH was the one that actually did. Is it SIGGRAPH? Am I saying that right? No, I don't think so. But the guys that actually wrote XFS, they actually went back to the authors and they got a bunch of documentation and a bunch of specs on XFS. And so for the past 6 years, they have been gradually adding all the capabilities that was once in there. So XFS, don't discount that one either. It's also very good. ButterFS, overall, for any of the modern types of I/O that your compilers are doing, that your web servers are doing, it's the fastest of all of them. So, yeah, I won't deny that. I mean, I don't hate ButterFS. I just don't trust it. That's all. I don't trust it for RAIDs. So. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. But ButterFS is also very fast, and my benchmarks that I did, if you can go back and look at it, I think if you look for Red Hat's new file system, I actually did a benchmark against ButterFS, and ButterFS for the most part was faster, but ButterFS takes a bit to get up to its load. So if you're a single user, your XFS is going to run faster than ButterFS will. If you're If you're in a load where you have 3 to 5 simultaneous users, now that would equate to 400 or 500 users on the system. But if you have that much of a load, then ButterFS really excels. I mean, it'll just walk away. It'll just keep going. It just tracks up until it runs out of memory. So yeah, no problem with ButterFS at all. I don't hate it. I think it's well written, except for the RAID part. I wouldn't trust that. Don't do a RAID on ButterFS. It will end badly for you. It will end very badly. And I can't recommend that. I don't want to see you guys lose data. I would really hate that. So, what time is it? So I've been at this for, let's see, actually getting the stream up and running was one thing, but it's actually been at this since about 11:30 to try to get it working. So I think I understand now what I need to do in the future. Don't schedule or delete the schedule and then just enter a new one to bring it up. But yeah, so put the schedule, advertise it. Yeah. There's ZFS gets a lot of criticism too because it uses up memory, and there's no denying that. But you can reduce that somewhat. You can reduce that if you're keeping your arcs and your zlogs off. I'm not using OBS at all, Jeffrey, at the moment. This is a complete build. So yeah, ZFS it's very rock solid. You can build raids in it. You can build mirrors in it. You can do you can pull it apart. You can copy stuff between them, between different ZFSs. You can have it do syncs, and their syncing inside of ZFS is blazingly fast. I remember, I'll give you an example. We had a ZFS pool that was on the same system as a normal RAID. So there was a RAID that was running on one half of the drives and the other half was ZFS. Don't ask me why they did that. I wouldn't have done it that way, but they did. The RAID controller, which controlled all the drives, failed. And so all the drives went down. And when they came back up, guess what? Guess when you find out you have aged drives is when you've powered them down and they get cold and then you bring them back up. And then we had a number of crashes. It took us on I was working on the ZFS side. It took us 4 days to recover. Do you want to take, now this is, this was somewhere north of 500 drives. So it'd be around 500 terabyte file system. Do you want to take a guess how long it took the RAID guys to finish their rebuild? Would you believe a month and a half? Yeah, a month and a half. So they stopped using the RAID because we were just sitting over there going, yeah, we're done. Oh, we're all done. What are you guys doing? You still waiting on yours? So yeah, after that they moved over. They got rid of their junk and came over and joined us. The problem is with RAIDs is that when they recover, they copy block by block on the drive, whether it has data or not. It just blindly starts copying stuff. ZFS doesn't do that. ZFS knows what's written. Yeah, that's true, Beer. That's true. Will I use ButterFS when I upgrade? No, I won't. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry. No, no. I don't like rebuilding my systems that much. No. I will be customizing my Fedora install. But hey, I'm not going to say bad things about people that do that. I mean, hey, that's your choice. I mean, that's what's right for you. It's just that's not right for me. So don't take what I say as snide comments. It's not. I'm not trying to cut anybody down. The thing about Linux is that you have freedom. You have choice. You can use whatever you want, and if it works for you, great. But, I'm not trying, it's not religion to me. I don't care if you don't use XFS. In fact, I think I'm going to be moving over and trying the new file system that Red Hat is. The thing I kind of find kind of puzzling about ButterFS as being the default on Fedora, 2 years ago, Red Hat deprecated ButterFS And so I don't quite understand that. So you, so XCP can do pass-throughs. I don't believe Proxmox can. At least I can't find any place where I could do a pass-through. There, maybe you guys know better. I'm not that experienced yet with Proxmox. I've been using it for less than 4 months now, and I'm not an expert in Proxmox yet. But XCP-NG I do know, and yes, you certainly can do pass-through. For more than one VM, if you it depends on the graphics card. If you have something like a Tesla, yeah. If you have something like a home graphics card or a gamer's graphics card, no, you can only pass it through once. But there are graphics cards that NVIDIA makes, and I don't know what they call them now, but they were called Tesla originally. Yeah. Do I work? No, I'm retired. I don't want to work anymore. I just do what I want. Yeah, I just do what I want now. And thanks, Bruno. Yeah, I'm done with the corporate world. They can just grow old together as far as well. Here, when I use XFS on my KISS Linux system, I'll use the FS on my yeah, good. So Proxmox can do it. Good. Thank you, Beer. I have not actually gotten to that point yet where I wanted to do that. What is your comfortable Linus score to target for Debian-based system? Is it difficult to reach 100 out of 100? So it's the old rule of engineering. The last 90% is 90% of the work, right? So yeah, the last 10% from 90 to 100 is 90% of the work. For internal, I'm fine with a score of 86, 87. A lot of things that are in Linus that are important to do are easy ones. The things I can't do anything about, well, I could if I spent like 6 weeks on each service configuring it. Systemd, it flags. It doesn't like Systemd, and it doesn't like Systemd because Systemd does not spend the time to do the security hardening on all of the services. And so if you do go out and you ever do a Systemd analyze and you put in security, you'll see it'll go through and evaluate how well and how open things are. And most of them hit a fail. Or a vulnerable setting. And Linus will just absolutely complain about that. So trying to get all that fixed. Personally, I think that the service guys, it isn't the fault of Systemd, it's the services that run under it. But the guys that write those services should be the ones developing the configurations to allow us to harden it. So, oh, I don't know about that. It's just that, the problem that I had on the way out was I don't like static things. I'm an architect. I was a systems architect and a chief architect for the last 11 years. I don't like static things, and I like to see how much, and I don't chase shiny objects either. I try to find things that save the company money. And I look for things that are innovative, that are actually pushing the envelope, that are moving things forward, besides moving everything to the cloud and paying twice as much for it. A lot of the companies that I work for were pushing to the cloud, and I was like, that's crazy. And you'll find that out. There are some applications where it's cheaper to go to the cloud, but most of the time it's more expensive. So, yeah. Yeah, mine too. Yeah, I have a lot of them on mine that are unsafe too, and that's one of the problems that you'll have with Linus. Linus won't give you a clean bill of health until you fix all that. Yes, Mitchell. I will definitely upload this, and so it's on here for later. Definitely. So, I think, yeah, I've been kind of going for a while. If you guys have more questions, I'll stick around with you. I don't have a problem with that. I got nothing else to do. I'd rather help you guys than go look at. I want to go do some benchmarks on this ZFS pool. I went through, and normally what I do is I walk first and or crawl, make sure that the thing is going to work for a while, make sure it's stable. And since I've never tried to use Thunderbolt as my I/O driver for ZFS, I just didn't know what I was going to get into, and so I didn't know what I was going to get into. So I just started building it up real slow. I used Ubuntu because Ubuntu's been experimenting more with ZFS than any of the other manufacturers have. Fedora certainly isn't doing anything with it. And so I chose them as the server platform. I chose Intel because Intel is Thunderbolt. That's their thing. So I figured if it was going to be the most stable, that would probably give me the best way of doing it. It has been very stable. And I went back and I tore the old pool down because a lot of the ones you can't change the parameters on them, like the A shift 12. You shouldn't anyway, like the A shift 12. You shouldn't change that on an existing pool. Usually you want to recreate it in order for it to do it. And compression, same thing. Compression works going forward, but it won't compress what's already there. So I turned on compression, I turned on A shift 12, and I did a couple of other things that you would normally help performance. And I want to go back now and benchmark it against what I got initially with the default settings to see if there was any improvement or did it level out. Because normally ZFS, well, you'll pick up some performance, but it'll level out all of the different I/O types. So that's what I really love about ZFS is it's just amazing on how well it works. Well, yeah. So let me explain. I worked in high security environments, and so these clouds would be private clouds, and that were run by Amazon, and they also had to have a certain security level, so they were very expensive, much more expensive. I wouldn't be surprised. That's probably why they still say it's experimental. Oh, you're quite welcome, Cardinal. I'm glad you enjoy them. Yeah, I've worked around. We had to actually do formal security certification on our systems. So even though the program that I worked on was unclassified, servers are never that way. So, yeah, unfortunately, they're never that way. Actually, I already have, Anton. It's one of my first ones on Gluster where I go through that. I went through the costs of the Gluster server as well. Now, that's probably changed. System D. I'm kind of worried about system. So, appalling. I come from a background of Unix. I started out in Unix, and the mantra Bell Labs was simple is better. The application should not try to do more than several things or one thing well. When you get into applications that they would refer to as spiderweb, you introduce three different things. You introduce a higher amount of latency because there are interfaces and boundaries that data has to cross in order to move from one layer to another. Second problem that you run into is that you also have additional code that has to handle those interfaces, and that does nothing for performance. And the third reason for that, the way that Bell Labs approached that, was simplicity, so that applications could be joined together. If you needed additional features and functionality, rather than write one monolithic giant program that did everything in the world, like Emacs. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. Anyway, that instead of doing that, you would create small modular code that could be easily put together as part of the pipe architecture. So that's the yes, Fedora has System D. So that's where I came from. Do I hate System D? No. I just worry about it is becoming too big. I mean they have now System D Home, and they're it's just it's getting more than just launching services. So yeah, I kind of worry about its direction. Yeah, to agree with you, Andrew. I don't want to be a guinea pig either. I would feel, if Red Hat had come back out and said we're gonna reinstate ButterFS for Red Hat, then Fedora would make sense. But Fedora is supposed to be where the development work is performed for Red Hat. It's really it's the future work that gets rolled into Red Hat, and since Red Hat had deprecated it, I'm confused. And then Red Hat comes out with their whole the whole new file system that they developed. Why isn't Fedora using that? I don't think the two are talking. I think they need to get in a room and talk to each other. Does Forehead? Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I do Linus installs on every distro review I do. So yes, I have included. It's always included with the review. So if you go and you look at anything I've done on Fedora, Ubuntu, Debian, Manjaro, I always run it. I've even run it on supposed secure OSs, and Linus just tore it apart on some of those. Um, yeah, I wouldn't be. I mean, I wouldn't. Oh, thank you, Pauline. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't play games, but I did. Well, I do, but not as much as I used to. Linux is a game. So I did WSL. I did a video on trying out WSL and then trying to get the WSL2. I think they need to work on their documentation. Is what I think. WSL was pretty easy to install, and then I had some people that were pointing out that some things I should have done. When I got to WSL2, it kind of fell apart because they didn't really explain until later in the documentation that, oh, by the way, you got to have the pro version of Windows for this to work. But yeah, what do I think of WSL? I think Windows is going to have a Linux kernel very soon. That's what I think. I'm based on the architecture of the old DEC Alpha, which, by the way, is what NT was based on, the DEC Alpha architecture for Open VAX. That is kind of craggy, and I know Microsoft has put bubblegum on it and tape on it and tried to keep it working, but I wonder. Based on there was an article that was really interesting. It was about an old time Linux and Unix guy. He's been around since I have, and he wrote an article the other day that it talked about. He thought that Windows will have to move to a Linux kernel for two reasons. One, the number of workstations and the demand for workstations is declining. People are buying phones. People are buying Chromebooks, for better or worse. And the only ones that are buying the PCs are gamers and us old guys that like to do things ourselves and not be in the cloud all the time. So he thinks and Windows licenses have steadily gone down. At some point, like all corporations, at some point, it's going to be harder and harder for Microsoft to justify keeping a large staff of developers working on Windows. And so I think they'll have to go to a Linux kernel in order to reduce the effort that they're putting into keeping Windows running. So I don't, from a business standpoint, that would make sense to me that they might do that. I don't know what they're planning on doing. Yeah, I thought from Johan, I thought you were. I honestly did. I just like watching EB sometimes. It's funny when he starts cussing at people blowing up his battleships. But I think the more integration that Linux has, the better it is for all of us. There are a lot of people that use Active Directory. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, we used Active Directory and we had requirements to use it, and there is no easy way to talk to that damn thing. Microsoft they look at standards as a challenge on how many ways to avoid actually meeting them. So, and they go out and do things themselves. So, it's too bad they don't. They didn't keep. They didn't keep with the LDAP. Actually, LDAP is actually an X.500 standard, and X.500 is a huge standard. I mean, I remember one customer that actually implemented. It was a hotel chain that actually implemented X.500, and they used that as a database for their employees. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. Good. I've seen a lot of people complain about System D. I don't personally, like I said, I don't personally have any skin in the game. If I really hated it, I would go over to BSD or Alpine Linux. If I really hated it, I would just go over there and be done with it. But I don't hate it, but I just think I don't know how long Pottering's going to be around, because he's a white male, so he'll probably be gone at some point anyway. He'll probably get himself in trouble and get fired. Yeah. Yeah. That they certainly have enough money. They could do that. Yep, no question. You're welcome. You're welcome. Great. Actually, actually Microsoft did. So I don't know how much you know about Microsoft's past, but in the DOS days, Microsoft took a version of the Unix operating system and developed Xenix with it. And at that time, they actually developed Windows on top of Xenix for a while. They were actually working on that. So what they did was they created a layer. There was the operating system kernel, and then there was a layer under it. I would expect that they would probably take some of that stuff out of mothballs and update it. And there is a layer even in NT between the NT kernel and the Windows itself. So yeah, I'm not saying it would be easy. It'd be done tomorrow, but they could certainly do that. Yeah, I did watch it. I was just laughing. EV is I don't know if you guys know him. He's English Bob. He was doing an install of Arch today, the classic Arch, doing it the old-fashioned way through the command line, and he had a few problems with it, and I feel for him. I've been there too with Arch. What I want to see is, if you want a real challenge, let's go back 30 years to when you had to hand load a DEC 10 with a paper tape using assembler that you wrote to actually load the first kernel onto the box, called a hand load. It's called a code load. Yeah, so that's why I don't really care much about hand loading things anymore. Been there, done it. In fact, that was the only way you could do it for a long time. Katina, you're welcome, and thanks for coming. So BSD distributions vary. FreeBSD, of course, is built around. So again, go back to the history of Unix. Berkeley Systems developed the initial BSD 4.4. When they tried to come out with 4.5, they ran into some legal problems because at that time AT&T was being broken up and sold off to Southwestern Bell. And Bell Labs went into Lucent, and basically the whole thing just kind of got split up between Novell and Lucent. Who else? There was somebody else in there, but anyway, the BSDs said, "Whoa, we don't want to be involved with this," so they rewrote their licensing agreement so that it was, we don't care what you do, we don't care if you put the code back in, just keep the lawyers away from us. So FreeBSD was one of the early adopters in that. NetBSD they wanted to build a secure network, so they did a lot of work with making networking more secure, and a lot of that code goes back and forth between those groups. OpenBSD, they wanted to do more with making things more secure from the operating system. So again, that code goes back and forth. Some of it gets used, some of it doesn't. They're all good. I mean, just again, what do you want? What do you want out of them? I like FreeBSD because their implementation is where ZFS is written. So that's the only reason why I use it, is because that's where the group that develops ZFS works. And so if you want to get the latest stuff and the latest bug fixes, that's the place to be. But that's just an opinion. I mean, I saw a question, Shikai, about book recommendations, and if I remember right, it was for a systems administrator or a basic understanding of Linux. Is that correct? I know it'll take you a while because there's a delay in the channel, but so yes, if you're looking for an overall understanding of Linux, the Debian System Administrator Handbook it is by far one of the best things I've ever seen written on the topic. Of course, you're going to run into some issues with it if you're trying to use Red Hat or CentOS, because the package managers are different. But if you really want to understand how Linux works, go get an install of Ubuntu or Debian, and then take that book and go down through it, because it'll teach you everything that you ever wanted to know, and then some, including how to program for it as well, if that's of your interest. If not, yes, it was. Xenix was very stable. In fact, I remember when Microsoft, they just didn't know what to do with DOS anymore. I mean, they kept putting on, they had extended memory, then they had super extended, and they had hyper extended, and then huge, and then it just turned into nonsense when they got to 32-bit, and they knew that DOS was dead at that point, when they just couldn't handle all the memory modules anymore, and all the different ways they had to do it. So Xenix was what they were considering replacing it with, until somebody came up with Windows. Linux Bible is another good one. AIX, yes. I haven't worked in it in a long time. Last time I worked with AIX was back 2007 was the last time I worked on it. So whatever version was around then. Yes, I have. They have a registry instead of a bunch of config files. AIX was the only one that I've ever encountered that actually had a registry similar to Windows, except IBM's version of it was even more brittle than Windows was, if you can believe that. But yeah, yes, I have. Paper tape. Funny. Jeffrey, you know what kind of paper tape it was. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. I prefer, I love Linux. I prefer Linux. So like I said, I just use FreeBSD for ZFS, but I am trying it out. I said I would move over to Linux. The only problem I had with it was there's a couple of things that Linux didn't implement that I need. And so those are going to get done, I think, the end of this year. They should, all that merge. They're merging the BSD and the Linux versions together. And then they're going to take the Mac version and they're going to merge it together too. By the way, ZFS runs on Mac as well. But it's been 3 different teams working on it. So you're welcome, Edwin. Linux internals. There's some books that are out in the Linux Foundation, but I think they want you to take a class to get them. Linux internals, they teach as a class. I'll look around for you, Sakai. I'll look around and see if I can find something. I don't know of anything offhand. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. It's also it's there was a lady that used to write for that, and I don't know if she died or disappeared, but she was really good. A lot of the chapters that she worked on was just excellent. Um, Not familiar with that one. Uh, yeah, you could also even go back into. There's some really good books by Rob Pike on Unix internals. The internals are not that much different. Now, when you get into threading, yeah, Unix didn't do threading, but for as far as memory management, as far as process management, they're almost identical. Linux and Unix is almost identical, except for, like I said, threads. That's okay. Hey, you got to grab those jokes when you can, right? Yeah, syscalls are fun. Or if you don't, if you want to bypass syscalls, you can learn BPF. Oh, OMV. I don't run TrueNAS and I don't run OMV. I run actual ZFS. So I run Open ZFS on BSD. I'm a command line guy. I don't need a GUI. Um, but I've done a review on FreeBSD, or excuse me, FreeNAS, and from what I can see of it, it looks pretty nice. It's just I don't need that. I don't live in the GUI. I don't. I learned on command line, so command line's fine. Yeah, I haven't seen that book around in a while. Uh, yeah, she was amazing. Yeah, she was amazing. Yeah, she could. Yeah, it's a funny thing. When I came into, I've told this story many times. When I came into this industry, it was dominated by women. I don't know what happened. Sometime between where the everybody started trying to use C for programming develop. C wasn't designed for doing programming for applications. It was designed to do systems and compilers. And everybody jumped on C. Somewhere around there, the women just said, no, bye, we're out of here. Yeah, they all just kind of disappeared all at once. I mean, but our operations staff was women, the programming staff was women, and most of the places, the only time you ever found guys working on anything was in the engineering side of computer science in the actual labs. And I'm not sure what happened. It might have been that the early days of computer science, there wasn't that many people graduating, and so every company in the world was sucking people out of the schools as fast as they could get them, and so the commercial businesses would hire whoever was left that didn't go into those businesses. But Ernesto, greetings to you. Nice to see you, and you're gonna hate me, Dr. You're gonna hate me. You're gonna hate me. I like GNOME. I like GNOME. If I don't spend a lot of time. Like I said, I don't spend a lot of time in it. So I'm usually jumping to into the shell as fast as I can. But I don't know. GNOME is comfortable. I came up from Unix and Macs. AT&T used Max's workstations, and believe it or not, and Unix as the servers, which at that time was a good match. So, and then they brought in their workstations to replace the Macs, which were like the Blit, some of the commercial versions of the Blit terminal and the Tektronix 4015, I think it was, which did graphics. Graphics. My first distro, Red Hat, was my first distro. Back when it was sold as a book, you could buy the book for $25 and there was a CD in the back of it, and it actually worked. I'll tell you, no, they weren't. Women were not the fastest at punch cards. Let me tell you what they were the fastest at. The IBM 401s and 1401s used wire boards to program. You could hand that to a guy, he'd be working on it for 8 hours. You could hand it to a woman, she'd be done in 20 minutes programming it. It was just like nothing to them, just like boop, 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 done, you know, and done. Slackware was good too, yeah. Although Slackware was a lot better than SLS. SLS was, oh man. Uh, yeah, I might do that. I might do that. I have a Debian install on most of the things I'll be honest with you. Most of the things I use Proxmox for is I like to put my Docker installs inside of a VM, and that gives it just a little bit extra protection from malware. So most of the things you're going to find that I'm running for myself, other than doing reviews, most of the stuff I do for myself is under Docker. Yeah, Jeffrey, that's why we always punched in the sequence number in the in column 74 to 80. So if you drop the deck, yeah, yeah. My first job was on Plato. I started out on Plato 5, and we had this was back in it was in the early 70s. Let's put it that way. It didn't have punch cards, and it didn't have tape, and it didn't have printers. It was all online. It was graphical. Um, it was a very fast. It had a very fluent programming language, um, and then my first real commercial job, they stuck me on a Honeywell 2020 running COBOL with punch cards, paper tape, and also magnetic tape and one disk drive. And I was like, "What the hell is this?" What is this? What does this mean? 9 edge down. What does that mean? Yeah, VAX with COBOL. How about this one? VAX with BASIC. I remember that one being a thing too. VAX with BASIC. Unraid is still built on Slackware? Oh, really? I didn't know that. I know a lot of guys that are using Unraid. I'm not one of them, but I know a lot of guys that are using it. I'll probably do some more on Ansible. Jeff Gerling guy, he's the expert. If you really want to know Ansible, he's really the expert on it. He's the one that wrote the book. He's got a channel on here, and he's got maybe 100,000 users on it already, but he does a lot of Ansible videos. Ansible, I use to manage my servers and manage my Gluster servers and keep them updated. Do I do all the fancy things with it? No, I don't, but it works well for what I use it for. Yeah, die ball. How about this one? How about snowball? Remember that one? There was also that. Wayland wins. I have problems with Wayland on Fedora. Fedora doesn't like Wayland. I always have to end up going back to X. Here's what I would wish the Linux kernel people would do is stop this nonsense and put the GUI inside of the kernel. I mean, enough is enough, guys. We've been dealing with this garbage on the outside in userland for a long time. If you're really serious about a desktop and you're really serious about GUI, put it inside the kernel so that if an application under X or under Wayland crashes, it doesn't take everything else with it. So anyway, that's just that level of protection would be really nice. And if they want a pattern to follow, Plan 9 did it. They already did it. Unix was deteriorating, Sam. It was blowing itself apart. AT&T, they made a cardinal error. And I hear people trying to do the same thing with Linux. And the cardinal error that they did is that AT&T tried to migrate everything from the Berkeley systems with Sun. And so everybody freaked out. IBM freaked out. HP freaked out. DEC freaked out. They thought AT&T was going to take over the world and leave them out in the cold. And so they formed OSF, the Open Source Foundation, or the Open Systems Foundation. And they developed their own version of Unix. And it just went downhill from there. AT&T had gone through the breakup, and then the RBox, which are the like the GTEs and the and Nortels and some of those guys, they started to buy the AT&T core, and the licensing became confused because AT&T wanted to get rid of the license, so they sold it to other companies, and they started fighting. They didn't sell all of it to one. They sold parts of it to one, parts of it to another, and then they started suing each other, and it just went downhill. And at that point, I said, Unix is never going to get a set of device drivers that's going to work on 386s, all 386s. So Linux looked like that was going to be the thing. And so it was already, I think Linux is, 92? I didn't start using Linux and probably until about 95. Yeah, about 95, something like that. Yeah, meantime, Microsoft walked away with everything. Yeah, you're right, Andrew. You're right. Yeah, but Linux is starting to show some of the same stuff, the same things that Unix made the mistake with. You don't want to force companies together. That's bad, because then the same thing could happen to Linux that happened to Unix. It could end up in everybody suing each other, and that does nothing for any of us. So yeah, you don't. Yeah, I heard some people want to consolidate everything into one package manager, into one set of tools. No, don't do that. Leave it alone. Let the market decide. If a package manager isn't any good, people won't use it. It'll die of its own. If a package isn't any good, nobody will use it. It'll die of its own. That's been the history of Linux. Let it work that way. That's fine. If it's good, it becomes popular. People use it. It starts getting more people to work on it, and it becomes better. Yeah. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I love this environment. I love the freedom of it, and I don't want to see that go away. I really don't, because there isn't one. God, you could take any solution. I don't care what it is. There's 25 ways you could think of to solving it. There isn't a right way to do it. It all depends on time, cost, effort. That's what really matters. And that you can go experiment. You can go find out what things you like and what you don't. GoTran, wow. Yeah, that goes back a way, Andrew. Awesome. Fortran is awesome. I love Fortran. But I'm an Algo guy, but I did touch some Fortran. I'm not too crazy about unformatted reads, though, especially when you're trying to move between machines with different word links. No, I'm never a big fan of that, but Fortran was awesome. And somebody was asking me, is Fortran dead? No, Fortran is not dead. Fortran is still, in fact, there's even an object version of Fortran today. It is used, it's used a lot in high performance computing. So yeah, the reason is that nobody wants to rewrite that code. Yeah, they want it temporarily. I think they're dying now, though. They're starting to go down the other way. Secure file share on Linux. ZFS. Done. ZFS. Samba? No way. Samba is not secure. No. NFS, not secure. The problem is those protocols were written back in the day when people didn't care about encryption or about data in flight. So, yeah, ZFS, definitely, would be my preference. Not because it's secure, but because it offers things that will support security. How's that for an answer? Intermediate Linux user. I've got videos on that subject. Sidya, here's the thing. I can't recommend to you what is the right distro for you. I don't know what your needs are. I don't know, are you an admin, a developer, just an enthusiast, a gamer? I have no idea. So I have a hard time I want to understand what it is you're trying to do, and then I could make a better recommendation. There isn't a one size fits all. There are some distros that are better at gaming. There's some distros that are better at development. There's some distros that are better at being at the bleeding edge, like Arch. There are some distros which are better at stability, like Debian. I mean, I don't know what you're looking for. There's no one right answer. It's what works for you. Again, it's all about choice. It's all about choice. Yeah. Again, beer. If you look at the history of Linux, um, those distros that aren't popular drop away. They just go away on their own. So don't worry about it. Yeah, there's been a lot of distros in the past too that are no longer around. So I wouldn't worry about that. That's just people experimenting with stuff, and that's good. We want that. Yeah, that's good. I have, Roger. I got old. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of Red Hat, and I've used Fedora for so long. I've been through a lot of pain with Fedora, and I understand it. I understand why they why they do things, and I also know to get away from the distro temporarily in September, because that's usually when they start breaking everything for the release in October. Ah, well, that's okay. That's cool, Roger. That's cool. If are you using it for just to learn? Are you using it for the web? Are you using it for, uh, to try to do all your home stuff, or hobbies, or whatever you might be into? That here's some advice for you, Roger. There's a group called the Biddle, and um, they have a group meet every Saturday in here on YouTube Live, where everybody talks about different things. That group is such a knowledgeable group of users, and they love to help new people out. They like to help anybody out with any kinds of things that you might want to do. So if you're not familiar with Biddle, I'll put some links in the show notes when I'm done with this for you. They are a great group. They will. Don't worry, beer. They will. Um, I'm not too worried about that. I'll if you here let me explain why I say that. RPM didn't exist. RPM existed, but Yum didn't. RPM was the only way. It was the only way to install packages was using the RPM command. Yellow Dog came along and they said, "Wow, this is complicated. I think we could simplify this and we'll create Yum." That got adopted. It's stuff like that people will try. They don't like something, they'll improve it, and you really want that. That's what makes Linux better. Having 2 or 3 big corporations doing it, no thanks. No thanks. They'll just try to make money off of us. They won't care about anything else. Peppermint yeah. Peppermint is a great release. I just don't know what's going to happen now after Mark passed away. Yeah, we'll find out when it comes out. It's only a couple weeks away, Roger. Yeah, it's only a couple weeks away. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is either. Yeah, change just a lot. Great. So you're probably trying to figure out what works for you, and that's good. That's what you want to do. Use the zpool command, Edwin, and then when you want to create like an NFS share or a Samba share from it, that's done with the ZFS command. Yeah. So you create the initial pool from zpool, and then everything else as far as setting up your volumes and your any of the other options that you want in it are done with ZFS. So, yep. Yeah. Thought opinions on doesn't include spyware. Almost everything includes spyware anymore. Just can't get away from it. I don't care what it is. Everybody wants to know what you're doing. They'll have their nose in your business. Ubuntu, I know that they have a program where you can volunteer to provide them data on how you're using. I think it's called Popularity Contest, but you can turn that off. I'm not aware of anything that they're doing other than they're going to know that you're installing packages because you're going against their servers. So they can track how many people have downloaded a certain version of the OS, and they can track what packages you're installing because you're using their repository. But as far as tracking what you're doing, popularity contest does. It will. I don't know. I'm not aware of any other telemetry on Ubuntu. Maybe you guys are. I haven't delved into it. Maybe I should. Maybe I should go in and actually rip it apart and see if I can find anything that's communicating back out. That's kind of hard to do, though. I can tell you they can bury that 50 different ways from Sunday. Everyday use? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Biddle is great. Biddle is awesome. Yep, there you go, Beer. There you go, Edwin. Beer's got a solution for you. Well, yeah, I wish people would stop saying that. This is the year of the Linux desktop. BOS. BOS. Yeah. Yeah. Remember that one well. Yeah, I hope they continue on with it. Peppermint is such an awesome thing. No, I didn't. I come back and I'll read their thoughts and their blog about what they're doing and how well things are going. I understand that they're on schedule for the merge between BSD. In fact, I think their next version, they're skipping. I'm at 8.4 right now. They're going to skip 0.84, I should say. They're not that high up, but 0.84, and they're going to skip 0.85 and go to release 2. Release 2 is the merge. So I don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe you guys know. I don't know yet when if they have it. I know they have a target date for the end of the year. I just haven't heard an exact date yet. But that will be the Linux and BSD merge. I'm looking forward to that. That'll be awesome. Linus is just a tool that will help you figure out whether or not you have it really looks at glaring holes in the system, and it's good for that. I'm not familiar with Nessus. We used some tools for actually determining system hardening that were done by the NSA, believe it or not. But yeah, I'm not familiar with Nessus at all. I wouldn't recommend using the NSA tools. No, they don't. They just do creating their own thing. That's right, Robot. You got it right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not from, yeah, I agree. I know it's off by default on the workstation. So I think, yeah, I've been here for a while. I'm starting to lose my voice. So I'm gonna see if I can take the stream down, and I want to come back up and just clear this off. Let me get back over here. There we go. And I want to thank you all for coming today. And I'll still be using Linus. Linus is free. It's simple. They just keep making it better and better. Every time I go and get a new version of it and download, they're checking some new thing on the system. So they continue to improve it, and as long as they continue to improve it, that's what I'm looking for, is just a security tool that will keep up with everything. So I want to thank you again. Thank you all for being here. I've enjoyed it. It was great to visit with y'all. And I hope that you take away two things about my attitude about Linux. One, it should be free. It should be as varied as it needs to be, because we're all individuals. We all have different needs. Some of us are musicians. Some of us are artists. Some of us are hackers. And maybe good ones. Some of us are programmers. Some of us are sysadmins. Some people are just, they don't care. They just want to use it and get on with their life, communicate with other people, and just have fun. I think that is the right thing that Linux is good at. So I hope to see you all again real soon, and have a great weekend. And well, actually, I'll be back Friday. So bye for now.